The good news with collaborations is that once you start the process, everybody wants to network. Do I have enough sound? Can I have a little more sound? Thank you. Yeah, a little more sound. Thank you very much, and welcome back. I think you're going to find this next phase of our discussion to be truly interesting. If you didn't pick up a copy or get a copy of the vital signs, please raise your hands because you had to stay to get a copy of the report. So raise your hands if you don't have a copy of what's called the vital signs. You'll notice the document's got a heart monitor on it. I talked about earlier the importance of understanding how do we measure our performance. And we in West Michigan believe that one of the components that will help us understand that is to actually understand what are the indicators that tell us that quality of life is where we want it to be. My challenge to the group that we worked with was you can have no more than 15. And the group kept coming back to me and said, well, what about number 16? I think there's one other one, number 18, that you should consider. I said, no, 15 is the goal. And so we're going to present to you 15 indicators that help us get a sense of what our quality of life is. It's obviously not the total scorecard. There's obviously other indicators that could and should be looked at. But I think when you see what we present today, you'll have a sense of the kind of thing that we're trying to get to. As is the case, I'd like to thank our funders first, because this work couldn't have happened without our funders. And I want to thank especially a good friend in the audience, Maxine Berman, who is Director of Special Projects for Governor Granholm. We started talking about this over 15 months ago. And in our case, the governor and others are looking at ways to improve our efficiency in terms of how we operate. My recommendation was let's understand what it is we're trying to improve, and then let's figure out how to do that. And so for that we were funded, and for that I appreciate the support of Maxine and the others at MISTA. As well as I'd like to thank the Steelcase Foundation, the Institute for Systemic Change, Consumers Energy, Butts Long, and DT Energy, as well as Comerica Bank. And if there's any representatives from this organization, you know what you're supposed to do. Roger, did you stand up? Where's Roger Morgenstern? How could I miss you? You should have stood up, Roger. Thank you. Thank you to our funders, though. The regional indicators is supported by a group of really dedicated people and partners. And again, it's a collaborative. As you look at the organizations, it represents the critical thinkers and organizations, at least some of those in our region. Macatawa Area Coordinating Council, the West Michigan Shoreline Regional Development Commission, the Grand Valley Metropolitan Council, the Delta Strategies, our good friends at Grand Valley State University from the Community Research Institute, truly a wonderful partner in this process, and they're going to be doing more for us as we go down the road. And I can't underscore the importance of the partnership with the Annis Water Resource Institute, and what a wonderful entity for us to have in West Michigan as a partner. And lastly, the Sustainability Initiative at Grand Valley, one of the leaders in terms of helping us think through that process. So one more time, if you're one of those groups and you're a member of one of those groups, please stand. Thank you. I'd like to recognize the call group who was instrumental in helping us put together the two reports that you've seen today. Appreciate their guidance, their help in helping us work through the design process. We hope that the documents work for you in that purpose. It's now my pleasure to introduce Sue Higgins. Sue is, if you don't know her, she's the Executive Director of the Macatawa Area Coordinating Council. More importantly, she was one of the founding members of the West Michigan Strategic Alliance. And from my perspective, I thank her as a friend for being there, because when I need to talk to somebody about how do we deal with a particular issue? How do we approach something that's important to our region? She's the go-to person. So, Sue Higgins, please.
Thank you very much. I get the pleasure of presenting the results of this work of more than 100 people. The West Michigan Vital Signs, the booklet that you should have just got at our break, offers 15 baseline indicators to begin to measure the quality of life here in West Michigan. There's so much that's good about West Michigan, and as Greg mentioned, trying to limit it to 15 measures has certainly been a challenge. What we want you to hear today is a little bit about who did this work, how we did it, but also to invite your debate and discussion. It's inevitable that you're going to disagree with some, that you have some thoughts about it, and we'll show you ways that will make it efficient for you to give that input. First of all, we looked at why to do a regional indicator project. Many of those reasons are outlined in the report. You can look at those later. But when Jim Brooks and I and Nancy Crandall and Jim Buck and some others first looked at what has become the West Michigan Strategic Alliance, we talked with a nationally known consultant, and one of the things he told us at the time was the thing that was quite different about West Michigan in trying to do such a project is we weren't facing a crisis. Certainly things have changed since then, and not all for the good. Some of those factors are globalization and the need to attract and nurture intellectual capital have created some of this sense of urgency. There are a number of regions throughout the country who are doing similar kinds of efforts. We certainly have interacted with them to learn from them and still to have ours be a little bit different. Some of those projects look at as many as 300 indicators, and managing that certainly gets to be a big challenge. Maybe someday we'll get to that many, but for right now, our start is to present the 15 that we have for you today. The work of the Alliance over the many years have really helped to build trust and nurture relationships that are necessary to do this kind of work. We learned a lot through this process, but we fully recognize that we still have a lot to learn, and we hope that you will help us in that effort. The process that we've gone through is like many of your organizations do. We created committees, and then we created some more committees. But each committee had a specific responsibility, and they all worked together very well. The steering committee, one of our first assignments was to help create an advisory committee. Many people gave of their expertise to develop a vision for what it meant for our region to be sustainable, and this resulted in the elements of sustainable quality of life that you'll find in the report. We brought together data experts, those number crunchers who know how to look at this technical data and make some sense of it. There's a technical advisory committee that helped to oversee that. And then we drew the strength of our partners to form a data working group. We came to say that these are the heavy lifters, the people that really looked at how do we not only find this data, but then how usable is it to make sense of what we're trying to look at. We brought together many different focus groups around the region so we could have checks along the way. Are we really going along the right path here? We want to thank everybody that was involved in the creation of this Vital Signs. Here comes one of those good jobs. If you look at the back of your report, there are many, many names on there. You can't possibly read them all from distance, but if your name is on here, would you please stand and be recognized for a very good job? Good job. Thank you. Certainly hundreds of indicators were proposed and considered. There was a lot of debate, active discussion. I think probably everyone involved had a favorite indicator or an idea of something to measure that would be telling about the region. Our project did not collect data, That was a big decision, but we used existing data that met a certain criteria. The factors that we looked at were reliability, comparability, geographic coverage, maintenance, update frequency, and access. Do we have either permission or is it affordable to get this data? Limitations of existing data at the regional level surprised certainly me, but some of our data experts as well, people that are very familiar with it. There was great value in the journey to create these indicators. New relationships were created and improved upon, especially with our data-savvy people. Other groups around the region are conducting indicator projects as well. We know of at least 5 that are currently underway. The Delta Strategies Community Counts, a community report card for Kent County and Greater Grand Rapids. Grand Valley State University Indicator Project. The Muskegon Area Sustainability Coalition. The Community Sustainability Partnership Initiative, and one that is just starting in the Holland-Zeeland area through our Community Foundation of the Holland and Zeeland area. We squeezed a lot into the vital signs, many drafts of this document in trying to get it to a format where it would make sense and still would be a working document. Again, we want your input on it, and one of the ways you can give your input is through the webpage at the Strategic Alliance. My part of this work is done for right now, but it is my pleasure to next introduce you to 3 of the data-savvy people from the Data Working Group. We're going to hear briefly from George Arachek, John Coaches, and Steve Faber. So first is George Arachek.
And good afternoon. When you think about indicators, I think it's really important for us to realize less is more. There's a reason why to only limit it to 15, because if you have any more than that, indeed, you'll get more confusion than you get light. And indeed, and it's also important to think about indicators with timeliness. We want indicators that we can watch grow with time as we proceed in doing what we think is best. I'm here to talk about the economic indicators. And indeed, before I do so, I'd like to say that there's 2 types of economic indicators in my belief. The first is a performance indicator. Performance is the speedometer of our economy. How are we doing? But equally important when you're driving your car is the gas meter. Do we have the gas gauge? Do we have enough gas to get going? I call that the factor indicator. And in our 5, we have both enclosed. Well, first of all, let's look at the one that I believe is one of the best speed indicators that we have, and that is per capita income. And unfortunately, we're lagging the rest of the state and the nation, as you can see here in this graph. Now, what's so important about per capita income? Well, in my book, it is clearly an indicator that shows the standard of living. It also is an indicator that shows the quality of jobs. It's an indicator that shows the well-being of people who are not working. In fact, this indicator contains a lot. And it is unfortunate that when we look at it, we do see, relative to the others, communities in the state and nation, this is one we do have to work on. Does it have disadvantages? Yes, it does. One of the disadvantages of this indicator will be made up by our last indicator. And that is, it doesn't talk about income equality. You can have a high per capita income for your community, but then at the same time have a high level of income inequality, something that our 5th indicator will address. The next indicator that we looked at is the employment rate. This is kind of new because everyone thinks about the unemployment rate. What's the unemployment rate, which is a standard indicator of conditions? We like the employment rate because it includes those who have been discouraged, those who are no longer looking for work, or those that have barriers to work. So indeed, when we look at the employment indicator, we are wanting to look at those that are working relative to all of that age group. And here, it's rather surprising that in terms of unemployment, we're actually, in terms of the employment rate, we're actually doing very well. To me, this reflects a very strong work ethic. It reflects that our community has a very strong attachment to the labor force. It shows that our community really has a strong willingness to work, and that the barriers stopping people from working may not be as great as we perceived. Now, do we always have room for improvement? Absolutely. But still, this is a good indicator. And it's one, and you can see here, as you can see relative to the U.S. and the Michigan, we're actually doing very well. And again, I would suggest we always talk about this area have a good work ethic, and we also always talk about this area having a commitment to work. I would think that this indicator, the employment rate, does speak loudly to that. Now I'd like to turn to a factor indicator. And this is education achievement. As we move to a knowledge-based environment, as we go to a knowledge-based working environment versus making goods for a living and changing that to thinking for a living, we have to think about education achievement. And this is the field gauge. And here, when we look at our numbers are relatively similar, however, unfortunately lower than that for the state and for the nation. Now, I want you to take note. We're looking at a particular group. We're looking at the 24, the 35-year-olds. We're looking at this group partly in envy. Oh, to be young again. But also because these individuals, these men and women, have options. They can live almost anywhere. They can be here, or they can be there. They can be in Ann Arbor. They can be in Chicago. They can be in Atlanta. They can be in San Francisco. We have to remember that the quality of our workforce really depends upon the quality of our life that we offer these individuals. And that's one of the challenges and why it's very important for us to look at this group. Because why should we care? Because I would argue that this indicator also reflects the quality of life that we have for young professionals. That they have job offers elsewhere. Why do they turn those down? And why did they accept ours? And in the global marketplace, study after study supports the statement that really is going to be the human resource. It's going to be our education level that determines our global position. And indeed, it reflects what we are going to be doing in the global economy. Are we going to be commodity makers, or are we going to be decision makers? And I would say that this, in particular indicator, shows which way we're going. Now, we also pride ourselves, whoops, sorry about that. We also pride ourselves with being a community of entrepreneurship. And indeed, when we look at professionals that are self-employed, this is good news. These are professionals, scientific and technical positions, who are self-employed. And you can see that, indeed, we are something special here in terms of the percent of these individuals who are self-employed. To me, this reflects entrepreneurship. This reflects the environment that we are providing for what Richard Florida has said is the creative class. And so here again, this is another indicator. Is it the best one we could use to monitor this? I don't know, but it's one that's available. And I think it does express very strongly that indeed we do have an environment for entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship of very smart, well-educated individuals. Then finally, free and reduced price lunch. This last indicator makes up for the deficiency of our first indicator. And that is, per capita income is very important as a performance indicator, but the question is, are there people being left behind? And most important of those people being left behind due to poverty and due to the lack of economic opportunity, we have to worry about our young people. And here, with 1/3 of our students receiving free and reduced price lunch, it has to be a little bit of concern that these individuals we have to worry whether or not these individuals will reach their full potential. And you can see here that we match almost lockstep with Michigan in the fact that, as you see over the last 5 years, which, by the way, has been an economic expansion for the nation. These last 5 years has been an economic expansion. You can see that the percent of our kids who have free and reduced price lunch has reached up to over 30%. Actually, as you can see here, over 35%. Why should we watch this? Because when we do studies, and when I've seen studies and read studies, it's clear that poverty does have an impact on the ability of our kids to reach their full potential. And it also has an impact on the quality of life that we have for our community. So here again, this definitely belongs in the top 5, and it is a partner to the per capita income as we look at how good the standard of living is for our community. With that, thank you very much.
What we'd like to do now is get some input from you about the importance and relevance of these indicators from your vantage point. We're going to show you each of these indicators paired with each other of the indicators, which means, for those of you who want to know, that you're going to have 10 pairs that you're going to look at. And in each case, there will be one on the top, one on the bottom, and you'll be using the 1 and 2 only on your keypad. If you think that the top item, when it comes up, is more relevant to improving the performance of our region, you'll vote 1. If it's the bottom one, you'll vote 2. And you'll see each of these paired. It'll become very apparent as those come up. Ready to go? So here you see per capita income on the top, employment rate on the bottom. Of those two, which is more relevant to improving performance in the region? Vote 1 for the top, 2 for the bottom. See self-employed professionals on the top, free and reduced price lunch on the bottom. Which is more relevant to improving performance in the region? Employment rate, educational attainment. Which is more relevant to achieving improvement in our region's performance? Educational attainment, self-employed professionals. Employment rate, free and reduced price lunch. per capita income, self-employed professionals. Free reduced price lunch, educational attainment. Self-employed professionals, the employment rate. And your last pair, educational attainment or per capita income. We're going to show you the results of this a little bit later after we look at some other ones. But we do have a little table exercise for you right now. We would like you at your tables to take a couple of minutes and grab one of those scratch pads and make a list of groups you know in the area who might already be working on things related to these 5 indicators.
They have a special paper for that.
Oh,
Special blue paper with...
special blue paper.
Oh, yeah, blue paper. Right, and I'm trying to...
You got 2 minutes to fill it out. Economic indicators. Use the blue sheet that was in your folders.
Seconds? Hello, everyone. And for the record, my name is John Coaches, and I do work for the Annis Water Resources Institute at Grand Valley State University. And like most of the other people that were involved in this project, I came with a specific perspective and area of expertise. I was asked to share my point of view with other professionals with somewhat dissimilar backgrounds and education and priorities. So just to put things in perspective, I think our first challenge was getting to know one another and creating this vocabulary that we could all understand. I mentioned this because the collaboration that has evolved from this project is by itself a significant accomplishment. I wanted also to point out that I have been involved in the assessment of environmental impacts in one way or another throughout my career. However, this is the first time I've ever had somebody like Greg looking over my shoulder and asking me almost on a daily basis, John, which is more important, the water we drink or the air we breathe? No, I'm kidding. You need to pick one or the other. That's the other perspective, I guess, Greg, in terms of how this process evolved in my eyes anyway. I'm being a little facetious, but I think you get the idea. Unfortunately, the economic systems we are attempting to monitor are complicated, and the truth is we don't fully understand all the interactions and dependencies that are often associated with healthy natural systems. I would also like to say up front that we aren't very systematic about the collection of environmental information. We are usually asked to assess specific problems or crises rather than collect background information that allows us to compare one geographic area with another or to even understand the changes that have occurred over time in a given locality. But all that aside, and through a process of compromise, and I want to underline the word compromise, we were able to identify what we think are some important environmental indicators for us to track. We started out with more than 30 suggestions, ideas that people had about indicators. They came from across the country and they came from within our group. Our job was to whittle down the list to something that would work for the West Michigan region. We kind of lumped these ideas or suggestions into 5 categories. We wanted to think about air quality, we wanted to think about water quality, we wanted to do something about land, energy, and recycling. In the recycling category, we started to focus on curbside recycling opportunities. Drop-off recycling implies that you can travel to some central location in your truck or your car and drop off the recyclable materials. Curbside recycling or curbside collection means you have your recyclables picked up as part of your waste disposal contract. Some counties have both. Some counties in our region have neither. It was a consensus of our group that curbside collection was more desirable and therefore something we would want to track. In searching the literature for available information, we found in 2001 a report prepared by the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality titled Recommendations for Improving and Expanding Recycling in Michigan. From that report, we were able to determine that Allegan, Kent, Muskegon, and Ottawa counties each had some sort of curbside collection of recyclables, such as plastic, paper, metal, and glass. Kent County, in fact, has 40 to 6% of its population served by curbside service. These statistics would in general suggest that the more urban counties are better at providing this kind of service. The literature did not provide any easy way to compare our region with other regions, but we were able to determine that Michigan in general recycles less than other Great Lakes states and less than the United States as a whole. Now, why would we watch this indicator? Why should we watch this indicator? Recycling has positive effect on the region's economy and environment by reducing greenhouse gas emissions, preserving natural resources, and returning valuable materials that would otherwise be lost to the economy. Even with a 20% recycling rate in the state of Michigan, we have a recycling industry that's estimated at nearly $2 billion per year. Perhaps one of our more controversial indicators is the closed beach days. As of spring of 2003, local health departments that perform beach sampling for bacteria at private and public beaches are required to report the results to the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. That information is compiled and made available to the public as part of the MDEQ's Beach Guard system. The health departments test for a very specific bacteria that indicates fecal contamination. That bacteria is Escherichia coli, or E. coli for short. Sources of E. coli include untreated wastewater, illicit waste connections to storm sewers, failing septic systems, sanitary system overflows, or agricultural runoff. It also comes from wild or domestic animals, such as waterfowl and pets. When E. coli concentrations exceed the safe limits for humans, the beaches are closed to swimming. This indicator simply keeps track of how many days beaches are closed in a year, and that the health departments have some discretion about where and when they collect water samples. A certain amount of variability in this indicator is expected. For instance, part of the increase in beach closings between 2005 and 2006 may be due to the increase in monitoring, and there was some additional funding made available in that time period for monitoring. Why should we watch this indicator? Increased incidence of beach closings should show or could show a negative trend in water quality. Beyond the health risk implied, when public beaches are closed even for a short period of time, there's loss of revenue for the local economy as recreational opportunities are reduced and tourism is impacted. Long-term beach closings may have even more serious implications by impacting the ability to attract new businesses and employees to a region. The next indicator is land use change. Land use change is probably one of the easiest for us conceptually because it details directly with our desire to understand sprawl and impacts on our region. Unfortunately, there is no consistent source of land use information, either locally or at the state or for the state as a whole. We were able to find statewide land use map developed by the U.S. Forest Service and the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, and that map is called the Integrated Forest Monitoring Assessment and Prescription, or IFMAP. IFMAP was created using 1999-2000 satellite imagery. The use of satellite imagery can be duplicated in the future and is thus a technique which lends itself to regional land use analysis. We wanted to look at land uses in three categories: agriculture, open space, and developed land. Developed land brings areas with hardened surfaces such as rooftops, parking lots, roads, and driveways. These are all things that result in water runoff instead of infiltration following a rain event. These are all things that contribute then changes to our local hydrology. This indicator offers us a snapshot in time, something that can be used in the future to assess changes in our landscape. The IFMAP product also allows some comparison between our region and other regions in the state. We used it here as an example of how our region compares to the more densely populated areas of southeast Michigan. Why should we watch this indicator? Understanding the changes in land use go to the heart of our ability to plan for essential social and economic services, while at the same time protecting and sustaining our environmental assets. Finally, our last indicator was a toxic release inventory. This is probably the most reliable of the environmental indicators being recommended. The creation of the toxic release inventory comes as a result of the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act of 1986. That act requires businesses to report the location and quantities of chemicals on site to state and local governments. The TRI, as it's called, lists currently the TRI list currently is approximately 650 chemicals long, including persistent, bioaccumulative, and toxic chemicals. Looking at the region as a whole, we see a consistent decrease in the disposal of these chemicals both on-site and off-site. This is good news. The fact is, it would appear that from these statistics that we are making real progress in eliminating these waste products altogether rather than simply moving them off-site. This, of course, would be a goal and a trend we would like to see in the future. Why should we watch this indicator? Access to TRI data keeps us better informed about what is happening with regard to release and disposal of these priority pollutants. Minimizing the production of these chemicals as waste products ultimately limits our exposure to these substances and results in a cleaner, healthier environment. In conclusion, I would like to emphasize that the four indicators we presented today are far from perfect. However, we are not stuck with information others have collected and what are currently reported in the literature. We can and should start to think about how we would do this better. I firmly believe that what is truly important about this project is the process that we have undertaken and the collaborations that have been created. We are going to get better at this as we continue to gain experience and even greater community support. Thank you.
Well, again, we're going to ask your opinion as to how relevant these indicators are in relationship to each other. Process will be the same, few less pairs because we have 4 instead of 5. So, which of these has more relevance to improving the region's performance? Closed beach days or land use change? Recycling programs or toxic release inventory? land use change, or toxic release inventory? Closed beach days or recycling programs? Toxic release inventory or closed beach days? Recycling programs or land use change? And again, we will show you the results a little bit later. But as we wrap this one up, grab your blue sheets again and talk at your tables and make a note of any groups you know that are working on this particular area.
Hello, my name is Steve Faber. I'm with the Delta Strategy. If you didn't hit number 6 on this at the beginning as a place that you go to learn, I encourage you to hit it again. We're learning a lot of information. We're pummeling you with information, and there's 6 more indicators to go. Similar to the presenters before me, I'll be walking through a set of indicators. These indicators are bound together by the theme of social justice. Again, these indicators are interconnected with the presentations of John and George. The selection of these indicators started from a look at what constituted quality of life in West Michigan: world-class education, authentic diversity, access and affordability, empowerment of people and communities, public safety, healthy lifestyles. Like the other indicators, a set of statements of quality of life guided us towards selecting specific data measures. The first of those data measures is household income by race and ethnicity. This indicator measures the median income of households by race and ethnicity. This data comes from the Census Bureau, who considers a household anyone occupying a house or a residency that would be pulling in income. So we have to be thinking about family structure as we look at this as well, and how many people in that household are actually bringing income. As you can see from the chart, there's strong disparities. In almost all cases in West Michigan, household income for minorities is not keeping pace with the income in the state and in the nation. Furthermore, the disparity in household income between whites and minorities as a group is about $15,000. This is a greater gap or disparity than we see at the nation by about $2,000. The greatest disparity in the region exists between whites and blacks. Why should we be watching this indicator? This is just one indicator in a larger set of indicators that will look at equal opportunity, diversity, cultural competency. But the disparity in household income between whites and minorities points towards the issue of different races and ethnicities having different access to assets and wealth. In addition to this indicator, our group looked at collecting data on residential housing patterns. If any of you have read Russ's book, Inside Game, Outside Game, the Grand Rapids, Muskegon, Holland area has the dubious distinction of being called a hyper-segregated region. And true enough, in looking at 2000 data, this same metro area scored in the bottom third of 320 metro areas as being considered most segregated. Concerns over racial segregation and the need for mixed race and income communities were at the core of discussions about housing, regional cooperation, and diversity. Increased diversity can have many positive influences, enriching educational experience, promoting personal growth, strengthening communities and workplaces, and enhancing the region's economic competitiveness, which George talked about. While extreme disparity and segregation is not healthy for individuals or the region. The next indicator that we looked at was voter participation. This is an indicator that looks at voter turnout, how many registered voters showed up for general elections. At this time, this indicator only looks at 4 counties because we're relying on county clerks for this information. The chart shows that West Michigan voter turnout is better than the state rate. And in comparing 2000 and 2004 general elections, there was a slight increase in turnout. So why do we care? Why do we watch it? This is one measure in looking at civic engagement and community decision-making. A strong voter turnout would point toward a region that believes it can influence policy and elect leaders that represent its beliefs. This data is consistent with other measures for civic engagement that we have for counties in the region. In a recent survey conducted by Grand Valley and Kent County, 55% of adults volunteered. That's 26% more than the national average. Furthermore, the region has a strong nonprofit sector with over 3,700 registered public charities and 483 private foundations in 2005. That's a 35% increase in nonprofits in that 5-year time, a 17% increase in foundations. Healthcare coverage. It was appropriate that you were talking about coming to an agreement because this is one of those indicators where we see the trend going in the wrong direction. This indicator measures the percentage of working age adults who report that they have no health care insurance. That's including employer, prepaid plans, government plans. And if you can see from the chart, that's increasing, above 12%. Working age adults without health care is climbing in the region. At this point, we don't have a comparable source for the national level, but in a recent report by a nonpartisan National Coalition of Healthcare, the nation is experiencing similar trends with as much as 20% of working age adults without health insurance in 2005. There are many reasons for these increases, including rising costs of health care, fewer employers offering health insurance, individuals that are transitioning from full-time to part-time work, going through divorces, becoming unemployed. Why should we watch it? This measure cuts across many of the issues related to health care in the areas of prevention, access, and treatment. In addition to health care coverage, many factors affect access to health care, including literacy, language, cultural sensitivity, and transportation. Most individuals and families are unable to pay the high cost of health care without a health insurance policy that at least partially covers their medical expenses. Those with no coverage are less likely to seek preventative health care options, relying on emergency room visits, which then result in a late diagnosis and the possible increase in preventable hospitalizations. Poor health can affect the ability of adults to work, children to learn, contributing to economic problems for families, reinforcing cycles of poverty, and reducing the productivity of individuals and communities. Next indicator is crime rate. The crime rate measures violent and property crime. The Uniform Crime Report identified 4 major violent crimes and 4 major property crimes that are reported by all police departments. The region's crime rate is below the state by about 100 to 150 crimes per 100,000 people. Our property crime trends are down, while violent crime is pretty steady. Again, we were not able to include national data on this measure, but early estimates show that in 2005, there were about 470 violent crimes and 3,400 property crimes per 100,000 in the nation. So the national average would be above our regional rate. Why should we watch it? Creating and maintaining safe and caring communities is essential to quality of life in the region. People will want to move to and stay living in communities where they feel safe. They see a place where they can raise their kids, play in their parks, invest in their properties. Similarly, businesses will invest in a place where they know their workers and customers are safe and where they can make those same investments. Second to last indicator. Teens not in school. This is our dropout rate equivalent. This indicator measures the estimated dropout rate by looking at the percentage of teens 16 to 19-year-old that are not enrolled in school and have not graduated by the time they turn 20. Currently, the Michigan Department of Education is retooling the way that it's going to be measuring dropout and graduation rates. So probably in the future, we'll take that information straight from the schools to get to this number. Our regional rate for dropouts is slightly higher than the state percentage, but less than the national percentage. We should also note that in some of our urban areas, this number doubles up to 13% dropout rate. A further breakdown of that number shows that male youth are more likely to drop out than females, and in some of these urban areas, 1 in 5 male teens between 16 and 19 are no longer in school. 1 in 5. Why should we watch it? Similar to the comments that George made on educational attainment measure, we know how critical education is to increasing economic opportunities. However, beyond that, quality education is an essential part of broadening a person's worldview and in their increased enjoyment of life. In a recent talk in Grand Rapids to the Grand Rapids Economic Club, Dr. Suzanne Morris cited research that shows a link between fourth grade proficiency on standardized tests and graduation rates 8 years later. This isn't this data, but if we look at our MEEP scores, that means in 2015 we'll have about an 85% graduation rate and a 15% dropout rate. In a few of our urban school districts right now, a little over half of fourth graders are proficient on these tests. So we're looking at close to a 50% dropout rate. Housing cost burden, final indicator. What does it measure? This indicator measures an aspect of affordability and cost of living by looking at the percent of household income that goes to owning a home. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development considers that if you're paying more than 30% of your income to housing yourself, your home is unaffordable. Everybody's doing some math right now. So if you're a typical household in the region, you're making about $47,000. So if you're paying more than $14,000 towards your mortgage per year, that's about $1,200 a month, your home would be considered unaffordable. About 30% of the region has a housing cost burden. This is marginally less than the state and the region. This measure doesn't specifically look at low-income affordability or rental. Housing is typically the most costly part of a household budget. Although this measure just looks at homeowners, this would translate into higher rental costs as well. Affordable housing in the region means that low and moderate income people can bring those funds to meet other basic needs, and so that's why it's critical. So these are your set of social justice indicators. Just real briefly, I want to talk about the challenges of the data. I'd give anything if we all walked around with one of these in our pockets and could hit numbers as we interact with the world. Throughout this project, one of our important factors was trying to find recent data. For the social indicators, this didn't prove as challenging as it did for some of the other groups. We're fortunate that the U.S. Census is retooling the way that it's collecting information through the American Community Survey, and so that information is going to be more frequent. For a lot of these indicators, we wanted to show the trend back to 2000. We just weren't able to do that because of the methodology of how they actually collected the data. But now we have a great baseline to start from. We should also note that a lot of these indicators and the environmental indicators and the economic indicators, aside from being interconnected, are a starting point. And we're really committed to moving this forward and finding real sustainability indicators, indicators that cut across all three of those areas so that they really tell us how we're doing, how we're really measuring that triple bottom line. And so we're looking forward to the future as we continue to tweak and fine-tune these indicators and make it even a more productive report. And as John pointed, we now have a lot of the partnerships that we need in order to do that. And so this document to me is this much of the work that was really accomplished through this. And so we're really excited about the future. Finally, the other very exciting part about this is all of this information is available at a county level. So by going on the website, you can, at WMSA, you'll be able to download pieces of this report that you find particularly valuable for you and your constituencies, but you'll also be able to look at how your county compares. We didn't put county data in this report because we really wanted to highlight this as a region, but all of that data is in there, so you can see how your communities are doing to either contributing towards that number going up or coming down, which is really exciting. I encourage you to head to the website and check out how your community is doing on all these indicators. I think that's it.
Great. And you know the drill. We're going to ask the same set of questions. Which is more relevant to achieving improvement in our region's performance, income by race and ethnicity or voter participation? Teens not in school or the housing cost burden? Crime rate or voter participation? No health care coverage, income by race and ethnicity? Housing cost burden or voter participation? Teens not in school, no health care coverage. Income by race and ethnicity, housing cost burden. Crime rate, teens not in school. No health care coverage, housing cost burden. Voter participation, teens not in school. Income by race and ethnicity, crime rate. voter participation, no health care coverage. Housing cost burden, crime rate. Teens not in school, income by race and ethnicity. And your last pair, no health care coverage, crime rate. And again, if you'll take 2 minutes and make some notes at your table about groups that are working in these areas.
All right. First of all, I want to say thank you to George, John, and Steve for the work that they did to guide each of their groups through the process. I hope you can understand and appreciate some of the challenges that each of them and all of the people that worked with us on this process have faced as we try to set a baseline here. But I'm very pleased with the baseline that we have. We're going to get a lot smarter about this as we go forward. If you'll do us a favor, to the extent that you do know of organizations that are working on the issues and you've filled this out, if somebody from your table could be responsible for taking this and just dropping it off at the registration table at the back, we won't lose that information. Collaboration is based, again, on understanding who's doing what for what purposes. I want you to all stand up for a minute and then sit back down because good job. All right. We're moving into the home stretch. Should we do that one more time? Stand up. You didn't say good job very loud. No, that's right. Phil's got it. I appreciate it. Good job. Thank you very much. One of the pleasures that I have, having been in the state all of my working career and having grown up in the state, is you develop great friendships and partnerships. And so when I was looking for a friend, and I come from the energy industry, to help us fund this initiative, I called my good friend Fred Shell at DTE Energy, and without hesitation, what do you need? I worked for CMS Energy, Consumers Energy, for my career, and I can tell you both energy companies are committed to the state. It's in our vested interest to make sure that this is the best place to live, work, and play, because you're the ones that buy the energy that we're trying to sell to you. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Fred Shell, who will introduce our keynote speaker. Fred?
Good afternoon. On behalf of the DTE Energy Board of Directors and the women and men of DTE Energy, whose hard work makes the foundation possible, I want to first thank you for letting us be part of this program this afternoon, and also thank you for making possible, Greg, the opportunity to sponsor this. We remain as we have been for probably close to 150 years, committed to this state and this community, and if not doubling down, we continue to make substantial investments, both financially and in terms of the investments that we try and make in the people in the communities that we serve. And so again, we are pleased to be with you today and to be working with Greg Northrup and the great team out here in that regard. I would mention, because you get one commercial spot before I introduce the speaker, that next week in greater detail, we will be announcing a more than $70 million investment in the upgrading and expansion of our natural gas distribution system across southern Grand Rapids and in Kent County. And this will enable us to serve our current customers more effectively, and it will ensure that we have the capacity to serve new customers as you all grow the economy of this region. And so we're happy about that as well, and you can watch for that announcement. The other thing I would say is, sadly, I'm not Roger Royer. He's far better looking than I am. But let me turn to the business at hand. Phil Power, for nearly 40 years, was the founder, editor, and CEO of a very successful communications company that had newspapers here in Michigan and in other parts of the Midwest. He wrote, during the course of that time, a very successful column, which continues to this day, which anybody who really wanted to know what was going on needed to read. He did public service, being appointed in 1987 to the Board of Regents of the University of Michigan, and he's probably the only person in the room right now that ever got over 1 million votes from his fellow citizens for public office. I think it takes the governor to do better than that, or the lieutenant governor. So that's an accomplishment. He currently serves as vice chair of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, and began all that in a way by graduating Phi Beta Kappa from the University of Michigan. So he is a Michigan man in all respects. I first had the opportunity to meet Phil, and I'm sure he doesn't remember this, in 1974, which I think was 33 years ago. And it's always chagrined me a little bit that at that time we both had prominent hairlines, and today he does and I don't, which is another success I would credit him with. In January of 2006, he founded the Center for Michigan, which I think is going to bring us some very needed policy perspectives from the center of the spectrum in the months and years ahead. So with that, it's my great honor and great privilege to introduce a gentleman not only with a prominent hairline, but with a prominent record of being a part of the public discourse of this state for a very long time and a very long time to come. Ladies and gentlemen, Phil Power.
That's a very nice introduction, Fred. Everybody knows that a high forehead indicates prominent brain capacity. Before I start, I want to pay tribute to Jim Brooks and to Greg Northrup and to their colleagues and collaborators for conceiving and creating and launching the West Michigan Strategic Partnership. It is, by all odds, one of the most important initiatives now going on in Michigan, and I hope that you will join me in a little applause.
Good job!
I've been thinking about our cold spring this year. Fred tells me he sold a lot of gas the last couple of weeks. And about the lessons our bad weather might offer us. I have a cabin up in the UP, northwest of Marquette, and we're doing some renovations up there. And when the big spring blizzard hit the UP a couple of weeks ago, carpenters were hard at work in the cabin. They listened to the wind roar, and they watched as 48 inches of snow fell in 4 days. And they listened to the 20-foot waves from Lake Superior hit the shore a couple hundred yards away. And when quitting time came, they were more than ready for a beer and a bowl of hot soup back in town. So they piled into their trucks and sloshed their way down the road back to Big Bay. A few miles, a big downed hemlock lay in the road, blocking their way. They didn't complain. They didn't wring their hands in fear. They didn't shake their heads, knowing they deserved better. They didn't whine. They didn't blame somebody in Lansing. No. They put their mittens back on and put their Mackinaws on, and they stepped back out into the driving snow. They got off their chainsaws, and they cleared the damn road. That's what me Michiganders have always done when the weather gets bad or times get hard. We bear down. And bearing down is what we're going to have to do in order to weather the economic storm that is upon us and endure to get to a happier, more prosperous Michigan. No secret. Michigan is at the most critical period of our common lifetimes. The deficits faced by the state are in the billions. Treasury officials worry that by this summer we could be plumb out of cash. As you read stories in the paper about the state budget crisis, please recognize that our leaders in Lansing are working frantically to put out brush fires. But there is a crowning forest fire jumping right over them. Simple fact is this: we need to rethink and reorganize our public priorities and our public purse to concentrate on investing our limited tax dollars in ways that maximize the prospects of future prosperity for Michigan residents. To a great degree, these priorities are expressed by the indicators that you just listened to and voted on in this gathering. They include growing the education and talent levels of our workforce, protecting our natural resources, promoting the wonderful recreational opportunities and quality of life our environment provides us here in Michigan, attracting and retaining businesses, helping foster a new and entrepreneurial economy. And how about assuring basic local services from police and fire protection, arts and culture, which result in the kinds of vibrant communities where young, educated, and entrepreneurial people want to live and stay and thrive. You ask, what's Michigan's next agenda? It's meeting the needs of our people today and laying the foundation for a better future for our people tomorrow. And fortunately, we have strong leadership in the various regions of our state to this task. The West Michigan Strategic Alliance is, of course, doing great work in benchmarking right here against other regions and against the rest of the nation, and using these metrics and these data to solve the public problems shared by your individual communities. But it isn't confined to the west side of the state. Other regions are mobilizing as well. Greg Northrup is working regularly with Doug Rothwell, who is the head of Detroit Renaissance, a group of CEOs that is in the process of beginning a 1D economic development design for southeastern Michigan. In Kalamazoo, groups like Southwest Michigan First and the Upjohn Institute for Employment Research and the entire education community are now mobilized around the incredible philanthropic district gift to the community called the Kalamazoo Promise. And up north, the Chambers of Commerce in Traverse City, Cadillac, and Petoskey have joined forces to craft a region-wide public policy agenda. My newspapers covered much of this state, and I've always felt that Michigan is a tremendously diverse place, that each region possesses different strengths and different weaknesses and demands different kinds of strategies and tactics in order to make progress. So it's great to see the emergence of strong, muscular, far-reaching regional groups taking the lead in bringing our state forward. But both Grand Rapids Mayor George Hartwell and Detroit Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick and lots of other regional leaders in between have pointed out there are big statewide hurdles in the progress that can be made by regions. Some state laws get in the way. The state tax code, the revenue sharing formulae for schools and local government units, arcane labor laws. Local officials here know that sharp reductions in revenue sharing have hurt communities on the west side of the state, and others realize the pain has been inflicted throughout Michigan. Effective regional efforts are hobbled by state labor laws that impose the highest prevailing wages on efforts to collaborate and share services. And binding arbitration takes labor negotiations out of the hands of local city councils and leaves decisions to arbitrators who are not accountable locally. As the Vital Signs report that was released today points out, and I quote, "Solutions to some of our toughest problems are outside the decision-making scope or resources of any one entity." That's true for West Michigan, and it's true for other regions of the state. Our regions are where the rubber hits the road. But to roll most effectively, your wheels need a good statewide network of highways. That's why we need better statewide leadership, not uniform rules promulgated in Lansing, but more flexible and better state support for your regional efforts. To that purpose, I'm going to ask you to consider a crucial election. And I'm not talking about the presidential race next year. I'm asking you to think a little farther down the road to the election of 2010. It will be a watershed election for Michigan. The governor's chair will be open. Governor Granholm cannot run for re-election. All 110 House seats are up for grabs, as they are every 2 years. And 30 of our 38 senators are term limited. The turnover in our leadership in state will be enormous. Frankly, I don't care which party wins in 2010. But what I do care about, and what I know many of you care about, is that filling these empty chairs with leaders, far-seeing leaders from both parties, who understand the challenges of our state and are willing to take bold and pragmatic steps to bring Michigan forward, are imperative. And they'll need help. They need to hear the collective voices for serious reform in Michigan. These voices are murmuring now that they should and must grow into a roar in 2010. I'm not going to be one of those people you elect in this watershed election 3.5 years from now, because under no circumstances am I going to run for any public office. Let's take that off the agenda. But what I am doing is working with many others on Michigan's next agenda. A little more than a year ago, I started something called the Center for Michigan, a think and do tank. Why think and do? Because thinking without doing is pointless, and doing without thinking is folly. The Center was founded to combat excessive partisanship and to focus our leaders on long-term solutions to the problems ailing our state. The Center's steering committee is bipartisan. It's a collection of veteran state leaders. It includes two people from West Michigan whom you know well, Mark Murray and Milt Rohr. Center is launching Michigan's Defining Moment, a large-scale public engagement campaign to find common ground to move this state forward. We are aiming to ignite and fan a citizen movement that will push for an overall reform of policy architecture for Michigan that can help regional groups grow and succeed and make a difference. Now, it's not always apparent in the froth of daily headlines, but a consensus is building statewide for a very far-reaching, broadly acceptable set of reforms aimed at maximizing our chances for future prosperity. Here are 4 key areas in that emerging consensus agenda. Number 1, maximize talent. Early childhood education, increasing the pool of college graduates, especially in 21st century knowledge economy fields, and attracting, retaining, training, and retraining a diverse and talented workforce. 2, maximizing public sector efficiency and accountability. We need much more collaboration among the more than 3,000 local government units. That's 3,000 local government units and school districts in our state. We need better performance benchmarking to help us assure we're getting the best possible services at the most efficient prices. And we've got to reform term limits, which have resulted in a lack of experienced decision-making in Lansing. 3, we need new public purse priorities. Lots of groups agree we have to move away from our current reliance on old-line manufacturing industries for our tax base and pull the tax system kicking and screaming into the 21st century. And there's a growing consensus that we need to rein in spending on public employee pension and health care costs, on prisons, and other governmental expenses before we consider tax increases, but we have to think about both. Michigan's Defining Moment campaign is designed to refine and build momentum for these kinds of reforms. That's not going to happen overnight. To get serious reform in the way our state works, we need to take the long view and be prepared for the hard slog. We are planning a campaign that will, by 2010, that watershed election year, engage thousands of community leaders and citizens in coming to consensus about how best to position Michigan for growth and success. Reaching consensus will require tough choices on the size, scope, and cost and assumptions of our public sector and the way it connects with our private sector. And it will require innovative and out-of-the-box thinking about the structure, workings, and priorities of government at all levels. You don't reach that kind of consensus through the calls that the pollsters make to you while you're trying to have a quiet dinner, or through the cartoons that pass as political commercials on TV. We think you do it through community engagement, through community conversations of ordinary citizens who are anxious to control their own destiny and define their own future as a state. The Center is engaging community leaders all across the state right now in these conversations. What we're doing is designed to reinforce what you're doing right here at the West Michigan Strategic Alliance. but we need your help to get it done. After I finish speaking today, please put your business cards on the tables in front of you. I'll sign you up to get the newsletter from the Center for Michigan. I'll ask you to participate in developing a statewide campaign to save our state. No fee, no obligation, no misuse of your email address. All I'm asking you is to spend just a little time out of your lives to help save our state. Stakes are high. To demonstrate, I'd like to ask each of you to stick your hands up. Each of you who has seen a child or a grandchild move out of Michigan in the last 10 years. Hands up. What about neighbors or friends? Hands up. It doesn't feel good when your grandchild says, I'm going to Chicago because there's nothing here for me. Or you're for your friend down the street to get laid off and say, I'm going back to the South to the family. We have a problem. We have a big problem. And to solve it, the only way that we are going to solve it is to take our future into our own hands. Each of us in this room has our own legacies to this land, to this state, to our own stories of happiness and triumph and the hopeful struggle of daily life. In our own soft souls, so many of us want Michigan to be a state where our kids and grandkids want to stay and thrive and prosper. That's the Michigan so many citizens have told us they want. A Michigan of beauty and innovation and prosperity and a future. The famous anthropologist Margaret Mead once said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. All it takes is a small group of thoughtful citizens. Come join us. Pull out your chainsaws. Clear the damn road. And let's pull together to get a better Michigan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Phil. Hopefully you can understand why I thought Phil might be a fitting close to today's program. If you agree with the kinds of thinking that Phil's offered up, I can tell you that he and the rest of us that are working on this effort are very receptive to looking at options, trying to figure out the right course to drive. Leave your business card on the table. If you want to read some interesting stuff, Phil does great work in that regard. I appreciate you coming over here, Phil. Thank you. Are you clicking me? Thank you. Both Steve Heacock and I are always very sensitive to people's time, and we're running towards the end of our agenda here. I'm going to just fly through some couple things real quickly, and then let Steve close this meeting. Obviously, hopefully you're asking the question, we've done the indicators report, what's next? A couple things. One is, we will develop a process to set regional goals. We know where we are today. The question is, where do we want to be tomorrow? We will do further benchmarking against other regions to understand how we compare and how well we compete against those that we think offer better quality of life, or at least quality of life that we'd like to track with. We will track data trends, ultimately, to understand are we getting better or worse. We will look at ways to modify and enhance the indicators where it makes sense to do that, but we're going to pretty much stay true to these as roadmaps to at least help us understand where we're going. You need to be consistent in this process, and we're proposing to do that. And lastly, our commitment to you is to report annually on our progress, so that, in fact, you will know, just as we will know, are we doing the right kinds of things? Are we making progress? When we finish today, we're going to end up having a sense, and when Brenda gets up here, we'll get there, a sense of kind of what are the top three things that you, as leaders of this region, think are important for us to look at. Our commitment to you is over the course of the summer, we will evaluate those against the regional priorities for collaboration that we've set for ourselves and make some decisions about the kinds of actions. Phil talked about thinking and doing, and we are about thinking and doing in a way that makes good sense. But what are the actions that we should take to move us forward relative to those indicators that suggest it's where we need to focus our priorities? We got limited resources, so let's get several things done well and move on to the next set of agendas. The last thing I want to do is to thank the people that work for me. They're not on the list per se as people that we've talked about before, but Pam Landis, Ted Parsons, Katie Call, Phil Rios, Maura Warren, Peter Metzger, Julie Metzger, Carol Williams, all the rest of the Parr family, and Karen Wolf are all players that help me look good. And without them, West Michigan Strategic Alliance wouldn't be doing the good work that it does today. So those people ought to stand up, and we'll say good job to you. Thank you. I'm always happy when I'm looking out at audiences like this to see young people, so I want to say thank you to Gary Clark for inviting his class from the Kennewaw Hills social sciences areas. We need to be more involved with our young people. They are our future, and they need to hear what it is that we as leaders are trying to do to make the future better. So thank you to each of you for spending your day with us. And with that, I will be happy to reintroduce the chairman of the West Michigan Strategic Alliance. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, we got one more finish, so we'll give you some feedback. The last thing I'll say, I'm trying to be sensitive to time. All of the information that you saw today will be on the website. And as Steve alluded to, we can break it down based on your interest at county levels. I urge you to take it on to other levels. The Alliance will focus on what we're doing, but I know there's many other organizations out there that are doing great work. We're here to help you be a resource for the region to move things forward. Okay, Brenda, go for it.
Okay, I'm going to show you real quickly. Economic prosperity indicators, you very clearly said the number one indicator is educational attainment. On environmental integrity, you very clearly said that land use change is the number one indicator. There was a little more, I don't want to call it disagreement, but there's a little more opinions on social justice. Teens not in school, income by race and ethnicity, and no health care coverage were all pretty high. Given that, we want to ask you a question about those 5 top priorities. So grab your keypad and answer this question. If you could address one and only one, which one would it be? And then I've got just a few meeting evaluation questions, and I'll turn it back over to Steve after that. Education. Pretty clearly, 47% of you said you would go after that one. We'd like to ask you just a couple questions about the West Michigan Strategic Alliance. Do you believe that regional collaboration has improved the quality of life in West Michigan over the past 7 years? Yes or no? Based on what you know about the history of West Michigan Strategic Alliance, as well as what you've seen today, do you believe it's on the right track? Is the work of the West Michigan Strategic Alliance relevant to the challenges faced by West Michigan? The mission statement of the West Michigan Strategic Alliance is to be a catalyst for regional collaboration. Do you believe that this is a good use of resources? Yes, 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 and yes. And finally, some questions about this meeting, just 3 quick questions. Did this meeting give you a greater understanding of West Michigan's Strategic Alliance's activities in the region? Do you know more now than you did when you got here? Did the meeting provide clarification of and alignment around key indicators for the region? And the last question, was this meeting a good use of your time? Please leave your keypads on the table at the end of the meeting. I'll pick them up and take care of them from there. I got to finish the vote. I'll show them the results. Yes, yes, and yes. Okay.
And to Brenda, we say,
Good job.
thank you. I have a couple of very short duties, and I'll take care of them, and we can move on then to the reception outside of this room. First of all, to Phil Power, thank you so much for being here and your inspirational talk. Your love of Michigan obviously shows through, and it is infectious, and we share it. By the way, great head of hair and great mind under it, so thank you. I started the session quoting Jonas Salk that when he said that the greatest reward for doing is the opportunity to do more, and you indeed have that opportunity at the West Michigan Strategic Alliance. We mentioned the Land Use Institute work. That joint venture will bring some $2 million into the area for land use work. We're going to need help. We're going to need work there. Wired continues with all the work that's there. The West Michigan Strategic Alliance Strategic Issues, Regional Issues Committee continues its work. We need help there. We have all these charrettes that are going to take place and that Greg is committed to. We need you involved there. By the way, we talked about the meaning of charrette. I understand it comes from the 19th century French, and it was the designers going to show their illustrations to their professors. And the carts that they would be in as they were scrambling to finish their work together were called charrettes. It's also the term used for the carts to take people to the guillotine. So make certain you go to the right charrette. With that, I have the privilege of drawing a card for a Michigan Products basket. Is the basket here? We've got it over there, and I have to draw a couple or one. Somebody, you have to be present. So let me draw one, and oh my, coincidentally, it says Steve Heacock. No, I'm kidding. Brenda Stringer, our friend from the John Ball Zoological Park. Is Brenda still here? I saw Bert. I didn't see Brenda. She loses that one. I'm going to call her tomorrow. Let me check it out. Jim Ross, Vice President, Advanced Manufacturing Strategies. Is that it then, Greg? Okay. Wonderful. Thank you all very much. I know that you all have, 50 emails and 10 voicemails because you spent the afternoon here. I suppose the elected officials, it's the opposite. It's 50 voicemails and 10 emails. But we greatly appreciate you being here and your participation. You are very, very important to this process and obviously to the region. So thank you very much, and God bless you.